And when you go back, and I'm a mechanism guy, right? I know you are too in functional neurology world. But if you just go type in something called insulin degrading enzyme, okay? Insulin degrading enzyme is an enzyme that breaks down and metabolizes insulin. It's in the brain. It's active in the brain. The problem with that enzyme is also responsible for clearing out inflammation and plaque in the brain. The problem is you only have so much of it. So imagine someone spills a bunch of water on the floor, right? You go to mop that water up, right? Let's call that water glucose and insulin. And let's say someone spills another bit of liquid, and that is more inflammation and plaque. The problem is that mop is already saturated. It can't clear up the other mess in the brain. So this is a sign that our brains are overloaded, and part of it has to do with, like you said, type 3 diabetes. And then you get in the nitty gritty. It's the insulin degrading enzyme that is the issue that's being stressed there. Thoughts?
Whoa. So I'm kind of speechless. I did not know this stat.
Isn't that crazy?
Gosh. So this,
I'll put it in the chat too. I'll put it in the chat, people listening.
oh my gosh. So of course that's a relative stat. So I'd like to know what the numbers are. Like how many adults that are in my age group, your age group, are walking around with dementia?
Yes. This is from the Blue Cross Blue Shield website. This is not like some, BuzzFeed article, right? This is internal studies from their own Blue Cross Blue Shield people, which, is in the millions of people.
Okay, because I joke and I say this tongue in cheek, but after COVID, I started questioning people's frontal lobes, especially on the road driving. I'm like, oh, this is someone who's not doing good here. It's just based on the behavior of the car, right?
Right.
This completely validates it. But this goes hand in hand. This goes hand in hand with things like simply trying intermittent fasting and what that can do to clean out the brain. It is. That I am unapologetically Christian. So whether you believe we've been on the planet 6 million years, billion years, or 6,000, the thing is we are meant to go a long time without food, a long time, regardless. And our brains and our bodies are really good at actually detoxifying and cleansing itself by not eating food. And that's why intermittent fasting is almost like a fad now. People are like, oh, I'm doing fasting. I'm like, yeah, you've been doing it for 10 years. Like, you're not exactly supposed to do it, all the time, every day. But
right.
That brings up the point of fasting and not chronically overloading your system with food. And what those.
So here's the thing. Go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
So it's been said out there that they're trying to pass Ozempic for obese children, right? Under 13 years old as a first line therapy. Just give me your knee jerk reaction. Ozempic before any diet change. Go ahead.
The first unfortunate thing that comes to mind is cancer. And that's because these medications, they are rough on the pancreas and the liver. So these drugs that are being used for type 2 diabetes, and then now people are using it for weight loss. What they're not talking about is the risk of pancreatic and liver cancers go up. As a first line therapy, I don't see that kid necessarily getting off the medication then. Especially through hormonal changes at being 13, 14, 15 years of age. And I'm not sure what that's going to do to their HPA access, to be honest with you.
I agree. I mean, I always look at the mechanism of the drug, right? So mechanism 1, right? Glucagon, like peptide 1. So it's basically increasing glucose production when glucose goes up, but it's decreasing it overall. 2, it's paralyzing the stomach in a way. So food sits longer in the stomach. So it creates a satiation signal. So essentially what you're doing is you're manipulating the satiation signal in the brain. So now you're more in control of your appetite. But the problem is you still have to have education about eating the right foods, because if you're still eating processed food, then that's a problem, because now you're eating less food. So now if the food's still processed, now we got a big problem of nutritional deficiencies, right? And number 2, what does that do to digestion? How does that impact absorption of other nutrients? I mean, we saw it with like metformin cause all kinds of methylation B vitamin issues. And we know that it hits the addiction center of the brain, where now you may not get any pleasure out of eating. And so now, do you eat enough? We know there's all kinds of muscle wasting data on people with taking Ozempic because they don't eat enough protein. And so now their
Mhm.
muscle starts to waste. And so now it's like you literally have to force food. Imagine like after a Thanksgiving Day dinner, like someone forcing more food in you. That's what eating most of the time is like on those medications.
Yeah, and now you're doing that to a teenager who is naturally, let's just say they're neurotypical, quote.
Yeah.
Uh, they're already going through a stage in their life where they're going to be obstinate. So then they're supposed to
Right.
grow. They're supposed to nourish their bodies quite a bit more than an adult. And now you're gonna there's so much in my mind now. Now, and talk about the females who have a heavy have it heavy on their hearts on how they look. And we have these females who are you going to try to convince a female who lost weight with taking this drug to eat because they finally look decent? They're not going to eat, and now we're going to end up having brain based, just in my world, brain based nutritional deficiency problems. We're gonna, like you said, they're not going to eat protein. We'll end up having. I don't. Are we going to end up having people with true berry walk around? Because
Right. And
uh,
also, yeah.
I or
Also, too, if it's go ahead. Go ahead.
well, or I'm just thinking just like actual old school berry scurvy, where people are
B1.
not getting nutrients because they're simply not eating. Oh gosh, I
I
didn't.
agree. And also, if we're, I know it's crazy. I mean, also, if we're impacting the part of the brain that allows pleasure from food, and then we're also seeing we're seeing it now being used for addiction because it cuts off that addiction. But I mean, you would know better than me, but I mean, those areas are probably pretty close to the areas of the brain that allow you to feel pleasure being with your spouse, doing a hobby, being with your kids. I imagine those pleasure centers are pretty close, and you'd probably see other apathy and other mood and depression related issues maybe as a side effect of these medications.
Yes. Yeah. Addiction is addiction is addiction. It doesn't matter if you're getting your pleasure from your technology or sex, drugs, rock and roll. But then if you are
Right?
not getting pleasure from things, then yeah, apathy is going down. I wonder what these drugs do to dopamine in the long run. Then what is that going to do to dopamine production, metabolism, levels in general? That is very concerning. So then now you have a teenager who doesn't want to eat. They're going to be even more apathetic. I mean, good luck seeing them come out of their room if they have a phone in their hand,
Totally.
let alone being on this drug. I did not know they're doing this. I know that they're pushing for this drug to be used a lot, and there's a lot going on behind the scenes to get it marketed and really get it pushed. It's going to be coming. A lot of people are going to see these ads more, but not on kids. That's holy cow.
Yeah. And my general recommendation is if you're 400 pounds, 400 pounds overweight, and you don't ever get full, that satiation signal is broken due to constant insulin resistance and hyper stimulating, hyper palatable dopamine foods. Maybe that makes sense for a period of time. My general recommendation, if you use it, chart your food, make sure you're getting enough protein, 1 pound per pound of body weight, and make sure you chart your micronutrients. Make sure they're all checking off. Use an app like Chronometer. Make sure your micros and macros make sense. But always try to get to the root cause. I think going the functional neurology, functional medicine way, there's so many other tools we have in our tool belt, nutritionally, nutrient wise, exercise wise, hormone wise, that I think may be a better approach. And also, what if you're hypoadrenal, hypothyroid, and then you're going that? Well, there's so many other systems that are broken that I consider are higher up that need to be worked on first.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Holy cow. Yeah, that is mind blowing. Now I got to put that on my list and go down this rabbit hole and see when this is coming because this is scary. Not good.
And so we can imagine like these 30 to 44-year olds in this Blue Cross Blue Shield study they're being diagnosed, right? We know that diagnosis has probably been coming for 10, 20 years. So now are we starting to see the first signs, the first step in the direction of Alzheimer's and dementia with 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 year olds? I'm going to guess it's starting there. At least it's got to start somewhere, right?
Gosh. I mean, I don't want to say even early as in their third or fourth decade of life, but oh my gosh. Uh, there certainly could be some with the right, I'll say recipe, in the teen years, I could see signs of that occurring, with the quote right medications like a GLP-1
Yeah.
and antipsychotic, and the continued just abuse of their whether they know it or not, abuse of their body with diet and exercise and just improper sleep hygiene, all of that. I could see that. I could 100% see that.
So, what do you see on your functional neurological assessments? I mean, obviously, you may do a diet diary, you may talk about nutrition and just glean it from that and from their daily routine. But what are you seeing from a manifestation physically in your testing
The biggest
when,
thing
when these issues are present?
Oh yeah, the biggest thing with most of these situations is I'm working with primarily people with attention issues, sensory processing problems. Again, children on the spectrum. The thing is these people are out of shape, whether it's physically they're overweight, or
Hmm.
they just do not have strength. That is that is a very big ordeal. This is a bit of a bombshell, but to put it in perspective, if you have a nonverbal child, depending on how old they are, and again, this is not to be braggadocious, not to sound arrogant. This is not what this is supposed to be. But the muscle tone of a nonverbal kid is going to be very low. They're going to be a sack of potatoes. They're not going to be able to move their
Yeah.
body well. Uh, the foundation to fine motor skills and your verbal skills are a fine motor skill. The foundation of fine motor skills is core strength and gross motor skills. So to get a child to talk that is nonverbal, we hound them and we kick their butts. Basically, we look like personal trainers and we get them to move their bodies. That is the ultra worst case scenario when you have a kid who's nonverbal. Otherwise, a lot of these kids, whether they're verbal or nonverbal, they're out of shape. So more and more of our program is being physically oriented, and then we're trying our best to have other practitioners. Like I need to just start sending families to you so you can see them on the nutritional needs because it's getting to be overwhelming, or other practitioners like you to take care of them nutritionally. And then our next office is going to basically have a whole it's almost going to look like a personal training studio and some part of it because of how much physical exercise these kiddos need.
So, you said some things that really hit a chord. So, you're talking about kids that are nonverbal, they need to move. So, you're talking about fine motor skills. What are some examples of fine motor skill exercise?
Well, so with kiddos on the spectrum, for instance, they we always want them to learn how to use a pencil, draw. We want them to be able to button their shirt, try to dress themselves. We want them to be able to talk. We want them to verbalize. We are organisms that are meant to speak, and if they're not speaking, then there's obviously something wrong. But that is not necessarily a verbal problem. It is downstream or upstream, if you will, and it's going to be a gross motor or core strength problem. So sometimes these kiddos, you can get some of their other fine motor skills taken care of, but because verbal skills is uh, it is such a dominant task of the brain, if you will. It takes a lot of metabolic activity. You can get them to use their hands a little bit, but to get them to use their mouth, that takes a little bit more. And it's usually stemming from this core strength and gross motor skills problem.
And I imagine too in your office, you're using a lot of laser technology. So you're doing probably some of these movements plus stimulating deeper parts of the brain at the same time. And probably you probably get better results doing that, right?
Yeah, and we hook them up on electrical equipment to do the strengthening for them, all sorts of things at the same time. Yep.
So it hits an accelerator. So you're giving parents exercises at home, but then you're doing things in the office that are kind of supercharging it.
Yes. Yep. It kind of more advanced forms of it involving technology.
So you kind of talked about patients that you see. You gave an example of like the nonverbal patient. What would that, again, not saying that particular patient, but that kind of patient in general, what would their kid's diet be like?
Most of the time, those kiddos are very picky. They have poor olfaction systems. That's part of what's going
Yep.
on with that brain disorder, and that is because their sensory systems are a very at what's called close to threshold. So if you're talking about a neuron, you got to follow me here, people. When it's at rest, it's down here. When it's ready to fire, it's up here.
Hmm.
Most of the time, they're
Hmm.
here. and it doesn't take much to overspill it. So if these kids often they walk in a room and they could smell delicious baked cookies and it's gross to them because it's too much input for their system, and they're like, that's disgusting, and out the room they go. So that's why bland chicken nuggets and mac and cheese are good, because it's carbohydrates, sugar for their adrenals, and
Sugar.
then
Yeah. Right.
it's a gluten just baked into chicken that's been processed, and it's gonna taste good. So their diets are usually just that, maybe a couple other things, but not much past that.
And you see gluten is a problem, right? From an inflammation standpoint in the brain in your
Yeah,
office.
100%. If it's not it's inflammatory for the brain, one, and then most of the time people are sensitive to it too, and that it's a kind of a humdinger. And at least the gluten in our country, we're not really meant to eat it. At least not regularly, every day, 3 times a day. It's
Right.
not meant for our brains.
Exactly. Now, let's just kind of go over some parenting skills. So you got a kid who's really picky. How do you handle it? Like my natural approach is this is one, it's environment. Like the other crap is not around, because if the kids can't see the other things, it's just a sense of this is all we got. Once there's that reservation of like, there's nothing else hiding around the corner. Okay. And then hunger kind of sits in, and then they're more open to eating healthier food. So my recommended take is environment number one. And number two, parents should be modeling the things that they want their kids to eat. They should be eating it. Having that family dinner or family meal where they're eating the thing as well kind of creates that, hey, it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. What's your take on that? And what else would you add to it? How forceful should you be outside of just saying, hey, well, if you don't want to eat it, then we'll just go hungry this meal. How do you handle it?
Well, it's not only that, but then I try to advocate for a lot of the ad rule. So you got the chicken nuggets and you got the mac and cheese over here, but you have to try this. And I'm not saying like
Yes.
try your leaf of lettuce. Like, no. You're going to have this much. And children on the spectrum they need expectations. So you tell them exactly that. You say, you eat this right here, then you can have that.
Yep.
Lay it
Yep.
out for them, and then even lay it out before you even have dinner. So expectations do well with these kids. You say, we're going to eat in 1 hour. 1 hour, you're going to have your chicken nuggets and mac and cheese. Before that, I'm going to have a little square on your plate, and you're going to eat all of that other food in that square. If you do not, then you don't. Then you make your deal, whatever it is. You take something away of that food, and you can make that the award, if you will.